This is a plane I bought new at the big store last year. $30. I have never once got a clean shaving off it. The mouth's cast crooked, the iron won't hold an edge, and no amount of fooling will make it cut. And this here is my pa's plane, near 100-year-old, and it'll peel a curl of oak so thin you can read a newspaper through it. One of these is worth money. The other one I keep on the bench to remind me what they're selling now. That's the whole list. 10 old tools, worth more today, worth more in dollars at a farm sale, and worth a sight more in your two hands than anything hanging on a peg at the hardware store. Here's the twist. Number 6 is a little steel square that a $100 bill won't buy new, and the cheap one in the bin beside it was never square a day in its life. Number 3 is the one tool that keeps every other tool on this list sharp, and back when they ran big, it could burst and kill a man where he stood. And number 1 is the plane in my hand right now, and I'll tell you why a man would rather have the old one, and it's not what you'd think. 10 old tools, worth more than the whole hardware store, what happened to them, and where you can still get the real article. Let's count them down. Number 10, the bit brace and a set of auger bits. Before there was a cordless drill on every belt, a hole in wood got bored with a brace, and it's a beautiful, simple thing. A crank of steel with a chuck on one end and a wood knob on the other, and you lean your chest into the knob and turn. Pa's was a miller's falls with a ratchet in the head, and I bored 1,000 holes with it, building fence and hanging gates before I was grown, and it's on my bench today with not a thing wrong with it. The size of a brace is the sweep, how big a circle the handle swings, 8 inch, 10, 12, and the bigger the sweep, the more a man's arm can lean on it. So a 10-inch brace bores a hole in oak a drill motor would stall dead in. The bits are augers, and here's a thing folks have forgot. They're sized in 1/16 of an inch and stamped with the number. So a bit stamped 7 is 7/16. A bit stamped 12 is 3/4. There's two patterns, the Jennings with the double twist that Russell Jennings patented back in 1855, and the Irwin solid center that come along in 1884, and both are still the finest wood bits made. Now the way it works is simple and clever both. There's a little screw point on the nose of the auger, cut like a wood screw, and it threads into the wood and pulls the whole bit through at a steady bite so you don't have to push, and the twist behind it lifts the shavings up and out of the hole. That's the whole of it. The failure is forcing a dull bit, or letting that lead screw strip out in soft pine so it stops pulling and just spins. Keep the bit sharp and let the screw do the pulling. A good old brace and a full set of bits runs you $30, $40 at a sale, and it'll outlive your grandchildren, and it never once needs charging. Set that against a drill motor whose battery is dead in 4 years and can't be bought no more. They still make new braces too, and good augers, but the old ones are better made and cheaper, and there's a drawer of them at every estate sale in the country. Number 9. A folding boxwood rule. A carpenter carried his rule in his pocket, folded up, and Pa's was a Stanley of yellow boxwood with little brass joints, and it lived in the bib of his overalls near 60 years. A tape measure's a fine thing, and I use one, but it curls up and it can't stand on its own, and it won't measure the inside of a box worth a thing. A folding rule lays flat and stiff and reads true, and there's jobs a tape just can't do. It's made of boxwood, and there's a reason. Not just that it's pretty. Boxwood is about the densest, tightest grained wood there is, so it don't swell in the damp, nor shrink in the dry the way a common wood would. And a measuring stick that changes length with the weather is worse than none. Coat on coat of that hard yellow wood, bound at every joint with brass, folded down to 6 or 8 inch, and opened out to 2 foot or 4. The good ones were graduated fine, down to the 16th, and the good English ones to 32nds, and marked so clean you could read 'em by lamplight. The joints are riveted brass, and when one wears loose after 50 years, you can peen it back tight with a light tap. Try that with a plastic tape. The failure is dropping it, plain and simple. Boxwood is hard, but it's brittle at the joint, and a folding rule that hits a concrete floor just so will snap a leg. and a snapped rule is scrap. Keep it in a pocket, not on the floor where a boot finds it. A real brass-bound boxwood rule sells for $20 to $40 now to men who know. More than a tape costs new, and it's worth every cent because it reads the same today as the day it was made. Stanley made better than 100 patterns of them. The little 4-fold 2-foot is the one to hunt. They still make folding rules, and boxwood ones if you look. Anyhow, a man who measures for a living ought to have one in his pocket, same as his great-grandfather did. Number 8, a pipe wrench that bites harder the more you pull. I plumbed this whole house myself, and I ran water and air line a mile underground for 31 years, and the wrench in my hand for most of it was a heavy old Stilson, and there is not a cheap one made today that's fit to carry its box. It's a pipe wrench, a long red handle thing with a toothed jaw, and the man who made the first one was Daniel Stilson, who worked for the Walworth Company up in Boston and patented his wrench in 1869. Here's the beautiful part of how it enters, and it's why it's lasted 150 years with the same shape. The top jaw isn't fixed solid, it floats a little. It's meant to rock. So when you set the teeth on a pipe and pull, the pull tips that jaw and drives the teeth in harder. And the harder you pull, the tighter it bites. It grips itself. A man designed that on purpose and got it exactly right the first time. The sizes run from a little 6-inch up to a monster 4-foot for big pipe. And the rule of thumb is the wrench ought to be about the length of your forearm for the pipe you're turning. So you've got to leverage without stripping the teeth. Now here's an honest warning, and it's the thing folks get wrong. A pipe wrench is for round pipe, and only for round pipe. Put it on a nut or a bolt head and pull, and it'll round the corners of that hex right off and ruin the nut, because those teeth are made to bite a round thing, not hold a flat. Use it for what it's for. A good drop-forged Stilson from the old days runs $15, $20 at a sale, and it'll grip pipe for another century. The cheap cast import next to it on the peg for about the same money will spring its jaw open under a hard pull and skin your knuckles doing it. The old ones forged from one bar of good steel. The new ones poured cheap and painted red to look the same. Buy the heavy old one every time. Number 7, a handsaw you can sharpen forever. There's a handsaw hanging in my shop that belonged to my pa and his pa before him, a Diston, and it has cut boards in this family for over 100 years, and it will cut clean tomorrow if I ask it to. Henry Diston started making saws in Philadelphia in 1840, and for 100 years a Diston was the saw a working man reached for, and there was real skill built into that blade you can't see by looking. It's called taper grinding. The blade isn't the same thickness all over. It's thick along the tooth line and ground gradually thinner toward the back and toward the tip, and the reason is so the saw won't bind in its own cut. The teeth cut a slot a hair wider than the thin back of the blade, so the body of the saw rides free in the kerf and never pinches. That's why a good handsaw glides where a cheap flat one drags and jams. The teeth are filed to account, 5 or 6 to the inch for ripping with the grain, 8 to 11 for cross-cutting across it, and they're set, bent out a touch left and right by turns to cup that clearance slot. A man who could file and set a saw right was worth knowing. And that's the failure of the store saw, and it's a bad one. The saws they sell now are hard point. The teeth are induction hardened, burnt hard so they stay sharp a while, but so hard a file skates right off them. So when they finally dull, you cannot sharpen them at all. You throw the whole saw away. A Diston you file back sharp on a winter evening as many times as you'll ever need. The last man on our branch who could hand file a saw so it sang was old Cull Renfro, and he's been gone since the 80s, and I file mine slow and clumsy. off the memory of watching him. A good vintage Diston is $20 to $40 at a sale. Sharpenable forever. The $12 hardpoint is landfill the day it dulls. This is a two-man crosscut's little cousin, and a different tool entirely. This is a saw for the bench. One man, one board. Number 6, a square that's actually square. Now I'll show you a tool most folks have never held a good one of, and it's the one that matters most, because everything you build is only as true as the square you build it with. This is a combination square, a heavy steel rule with a sliding head that gives you a square edge, a 45, a level, a depth gauge, and a scribe, all in the one tool. The finest are made by Starrett, and Leroy Starrett patented this very tool in 1877 and started his company up in Athol, Massachusetts, and they've made them true ever since. And here is the honest thing nobody tells you, and it's worth the whole video. Most cheap squares are not square. They never were. They come stamped out of soft metal and thrown in a bin, and half of them are off a little from the day they're made. And you build a whole cabinet off a lying square and wonder why the door won't shut. Here's how you test one. Old-timer's trick. Costs nothing. Set the square on the true edge of a board and scribe a line across. Then flip the square over, same spot, and scribe again. If the two lines lay right on top of each other, the square's true. If they open up into a little V, it's off by half that V, and it lies. Do that in the store before you buy, and you'll be shocked what you put back. A real Starrett is machined true to a few thousandths of an inch, and hardened so it stays that way. And the failure with even a good one is dropping it. Knock the head off the beam on a concrete floor, and you can throw its accuracy off. So you treat it like the instrument it is. A Starrett combination square is better than $100 new. And here's the thing. A used one at a sale still brings $60, $70. Because a true square is a true square for life. The $8 bin square costs you every project you build with it. This is the one tool on the list I'd tell a young man to buy new if he can't find old. Those first ones live on the bench and in the toolbox. From here down, we're into the shop that makes and mends the tools themselves. The vise, the axe, the stone, and there's one coming that could take a hand off if you don't respect it. If you want the real article, named before nobody's left who knows it, subscribe. I put one of these up every few days. Number 5, a blacksmith's post vise. Every other vise made is a bench vise, bolted to the top of your bench. And it's fine for holding a board while you saw it. But there's another kind, and if you've never seen one, you don't know what you're missing. And it's the one tool in Paul's shed I'd run back into a fire for. It's a post vise, a leg vise some call it, and it's made of wrought iron with a long leg that runs from the jaws all the way down to the floor. And it mounts to the bench and stands on the ground both. That leg is the whole genius of it, and here's why. When you clamp hot iron in a post vise and beat on it with a hammer, the shock of every blow runs straight down that leg into the floor and the earth, instead of into the bench and the vise screw. So you can hammer on it, bend on it, beat on it all day, and it takes it. A bench vise is cast iron, and cast iron is brittle. And the first time you really hammer on one, you'll crack it clean in two. The jaws run 4 to 6 inch wide, and the good ones weigh 40 to 100 pounds. And the old makers stamped their name in the side. Peter Wright out of England, Colombian here at home, and a stamped one's worth having. The screw is hand cut and coarse, so it closes fast and grips like a bear. The failure isn't the post vise, it's using the wrong vise for the work. A man buys a cheap cast import vise for $40, mounts it, goes to straighten a plow point on it with a sledge, and cracks the casting the first good lick. The post vise is the one you're allowed to hit. A real post vise runs $150 to $300 at a sale now. And that sounds like money till you've cracked 2 cast vices that cost near as much and can't be fixed. There's men been beating iron on the same post vise for 150 years. You can't buy one new at the hardware store at any price. You buy it off the wall of a shop where an old smith has died. Number 4, a felling axe with real steel in it. I've cut a lot of firewood in my life and split a lot. And I'll tell you, the head is everything and the handle is just what you hold to swing the head. A good axe head is a wonderful piece of steel, high carbon at the bit, so it takes and holds a keen edge. And the old makers even tempered it soft toward the pole and the eye, so the head wouldn't crack from a shock. Collins made 'em out of Collinsville, Connecticut. Since 1826, Kelly and Plum made 'em, and a head with one of those names on it is worth carrying home. They came in patterns for the country you were in, a Michigan, a Dayton, a Jersey, and in weights from a 2 1/4 pound boy's axe up to a full 4-pound felling axe. And the weight you want is the one your own arm can swing true 100 times without cheating the stroke. A good edge on good steel will pop a chip out of green oak the size of your hand. Now here's the honest part, because I don't want you hauling home junk. Not every old axe head is worth a thing. You look at the eye for a crack, you look at the pole to see it's not mushroomed over from being used as a hammer, and you look that nobody's ground it back so far the good hard steel is gone. And that ring test people talk about, tapping it to hear it sing, that's for anvils and grindstones, not axes. You judge an axe by the eye, the steel, and how much life is left in the bit. The failure with a store axe is soft steel, a cheap modern head that won't hold an edge, so it rolls dull in one afternoon of real cutting, and no stone will keep it. And a badly hung head that works loose can fly off the handle mid-swing, which is a way to get somebody hurt. So hang it right and keep the wedge tight. A vintage head, rehung on a good hickory handle, costs you $20 to $60 all in and outchops anything on the rack. Just understand this is the felling axe, the chopping tool, not the broad hewing axe a man squares a log with, which is its own animal. This is the one that fills the woodshed. Number 3, the grindstone that keeps every edge alive. Every tool I've named that cuts, the plane, the saw, the axe, the chisel, is only worth having sharp. And there was one tool that kept all the rest of them sharp, and it's the grindstone. A big wheel of sandstone, 2 foot across, hung on a crank or a foot treadle, turning slow in a little trough of water. Sunday evenings that was a boy's job, and I turned the crank for Paul by the hour while he leaned an axe or a scythe blade to the stone, the water flinging off in a fine cold spray, and I can hear the sound of it yet. Here's why it turns wet and turns slow, and it's the whole secret. Grinding steel makes heat from the friction, and if a blade gets too hot, the heat draws the temper. It softens the very hardness you sharpened it for, and a softened edge won't hold worth a thing. The slow wet sandstone carries that heat away as fast as it's made, so it grinds a keen edge and never once burns it. That's why the old whetstone beats a modern dry grinder for a fine edge every time. And here's a warning worth heeding, because these stones have killed men. A grinding wheel of sandstone can burst apart if it's cracked or spun too fast. And back when the big ones ran in the mills, a flying piece of a shattered stone would kill a man where he stood. So before you turn one, look the whole wheel over for a crack. Keep it turning slow, the way it was meant to, and not driven fast by a motor. And never stand square in line with it. And don't leave the stone soaking in its water trough between times, for one side drinks the water and goes soft and heavy, and then the wheel turns lopsided, and that's when one lets go. So respect it, and dump the water off after, or lift the stone clear of the trough. The last man up our cove who could true up a worn grindstone and dress its face flat again was my Uncle Vester, dead since '79. And when the stone wore hollow after him, we just made do. A good grindstone on its frame is $100 or more at a sale, and hard to move, but it's the tool that makes every other sharp tool possible. Turn it slow, turn it wet, and every edge you own stays keen for a lifetime. Number 2, a level that reads true after 80 years. A level looks like the simplest tool there is, a stick with a bubble in it, but a level that lies is the most dangerous tool in the box because you can't see the crooked it builds until the whole thing's up. Pa's level was mahogany with brass all up the edges, and I set the timbers plumb in more than one mine drift by the read of it, and it reads dead true today. The bubble floats in a little glass tube of spirit, alcohol, which is why it's called a spirit level, and the tube's curved ever so slight, so the bubble always rides to the high point of the curve, which is dead center only when the tool sits true. Folks have been reading a bubble like that since the 1600s. The old ones set that vial in a body of mahogany or rosewood, bound in brass, because good hardwood stays straight and dead flat where a cheap thing warps. The failure is a cheap level whose vial was set crooked at the factory or drifts loose over time, and then it lies to you with confidence. Here's the check. Costs nothing. Set it on a surface, read the bubble, then spin it end for end in the same spot and read again. If the bubble sets the same both ways, it's true. If it don't, it's lying, and you throw it out or reset the vial. A good old brass-bound level brings more used than a plastic one costs new, and it'll read true long after the plastic one's in the ditch. The vials can even be reset in the good wood ones. Build off a true level and the house stands square 100 years. Build off a liar and you'll see it in every door that won't close. Number 1, a hand plane that becomes your own two hands. Back to the plane I held up at the start. This is a bench plane, a Stanley, the kind they call a Bailey, after Leonard Bailey, whose patents Stanley bought back in 1869 and built into the finest planes ever made in this country. The ones from the 20s and 30s carry a little heart stamped in the steel, and collectors call them the sweetheart planes, and a man who has one doesn't part with it. A number 4 for smoothing, a number 5 for the rough work. Those two would build you about anything. Now a plane looks like a block of iron with a blade in it, but there's more sitting in it than you'd think. The blade lays on an angled bed they call the frog that slides to open or close the mouth. A second little blade, the chip breaker, sits right behind the edge and curls the shaving up and snaps it so the grain don't tear ahead of the cut. And the whole bottom, the sole, has to be dead flat for any of it to work. Set right, it peels a shaving you can see daylight through. But here's the real reason a man wants the old one, and it's not just that it's built better, though it is. A plane gets tuned. You flatten its sole, you fit its frog, you hone its iron to your own hand and your own wood, and the more years you work it, the more it becomes yours, set to the way you stand and the way you push and the timber you cut. My pa's plane isn't just old, it's got 60 years of his hands ground into it, the sole worn to his stroke, and when I run it, I'm borrowing the way he worked. You cannot buy that. It isn't made in a factory. It's made slow by one man over a working life. The failure of the store plane is that there's nothing to tune. The sole's cast crooked and stays crooked, and the iron's too soft to take a real edge. So no amount of a good man's care will ever make it cut. That's the difference. One is a tool you finish yourself and keep for life. The other's a shape of a tool, made to be bought and thrown away. A Sweetheart Stanley runs $40 to $80 at a sale, less than a useless new one in some stores, and it'll outwork it the day you buy it. And if you want new, the good makers, Nielsen up in Maine, Veritas, build them right again, $200–300, made to be tuned and kept. The knowledge that died was never how to swing a plane. It was how to read a piece of wood and set a tool to it. Learned standing at a bench next to a man who'd done it 40 years. And he never wrote it down because he figured his boy would learn it the same way he did, with his hands. One thing before I go, and I'll only say it the once. Everything I know, everything on this channel, I'm putting in a book, sourced the way we do it here. Every claim with where it comes from, so it's written down and checkable before the last of us takes it into the ground. If you want it, it's at EzraCade.com. That's the only time you'll hear me say it. They knew, now it's written down. Here's my challenge. Pick one and go find a real article. Go to a farm sale this month and bring home one good old tool, a brace, a boxwood rule, a distance saw, for the price of a hardware store toy that won't last a year. Take the square out of your toolbox and test it the way I showed you. Flip it and scribe and see if it's been lying to you. Or find an old plane, flatten its sole, hone the iron, and take the first clean shaving off it, and I promise you'll feel why a man keeps one his whole life. Then tell me in the comments, and I mean this one, what's the oldest tool in your shop that you still reach for first, and whose hand held it before yours, and what county were they working in? I want to know what's still out there earning its keep. None of it was ever about the old days being easier. Plenty of that work was cold and hard, and I'll not pretend otherwise. It's that some tools were made to be tuned and kept and handed down, and got crowded out by things made to look about the same and last a season. And a man ought to know the difference before he lays his money down. They knew, now it's written down.